entonces para dar inicio a esta actividad.
Okay. Oh my dear. Yes, the machine. It's always such a pleasure for me to meet my architect colleagues around the world. And because we have the same language and we have the same education, and it's amazing that all over the world you can go into a group of architects and then at once realize that we speak the same language, have got by more or less the same education, and we can work together, which is wonderful. I'm going to make a talk on Friday, tomorrow, which will be a little bit more comprehensive. So I thought, what do I do today? I will talk a little bit about the city of the future, because there appears to be some confusion about this subject. Why does this not change? I'll see here. I was in India for a conference, and it was about the past and the future, and this was their poster. And I went to all the Indians with the poster and said, is this the future or is this the past? Oh, it is the future. And I said, oh, holy Moses. Because it looks like Atlanta, Georgia in 1972. Then I thought, they have a problem in India, if this is the future. Then I went to another conference with UN Habitat about the new urban agenda and found the same poster, but now with yellow buses at the edge of the freeways and with 6 windmills and 2 hospitals. And I thought, is this really the future? And I realized that we have a number of images of the future. We have also a number of completely hysterical predictions about what the future will be. Some people who are really hysterical are the automobile industry. And they will tell us again and again that the moment we have the automatic cars, there will be no problems at all. And that will be in the automobile factories. This is a future rendering of the future by Ford. And they have been so afraid, so they say, this is the city of tomorrow, decades and decades from now. Because they don't dare to say, they hope this is tomorrow. And look at this scenery. And when I see this scenery, I'm so glad that I'm old. Because I'm not experienced this. Look where the people are walking, how wonderful a place it is for walking. And there are few people crossing the streets, and everything else is technocracy. And if the automatic cars cannot solve all the problems, we have, of course, the drones and the helicopters who will bring everything to everybody and fill the air with wings. Wonderful perspective. We have the smart city. We have all kinds of smart city. All of these images and all of these predictions of the future is based on some genius idea from mankind, some technological idea, some great investment, where everybody of these hope that they can sell endless images to endless many people all over the world. Smart city has a number of good things, and it's of course it's very smart. It's not so smart that the guy out in the middle of the traffic has not found out to go on the bicycle later, but smart. Googling the subject future cities on the internet, you come up with this. It is so influenced by architects full of good ideas and full of creativity and full of all kinds of things. And there's not a single of these places I would like to be old in, or I would like to rear kids in, or I would like. The future doesn't look very bright in all these images. So, also, with all these things I've pointed to are based on investments, they are based on new technology, and the major thing which I've heard many places is just wait for the new technology, invest in it, and all your problems will be solved. But there are quite a few places where the expensive new technology will not give the answers. And of course, the major problems in this world is not in the kind of cities I showed you, some of them. It is definitely in the Asian cities and in Africa, and actually 90% of all the increase in urban fabric will happen in Asia and in Africa. In Africa, the population is predicted to double in 20 years from 1 billion to 2 billion. So and they will be very poor. They are living already in slums. They will never have money to invest in all these fabulous things we talk about. So that is to me not really a solution worldwide for the future. Then I raise the question. Maybe the future has started already. Maybe we don't have to wait for the future and for the technology. Maybe we already have in this world today ideas and examples on what could serve as models for future cities. And this is the background for my real talk, which comes now. And that is about the ability and the need to make livable cities for the 21st century. And in this context, it's very important to realize that we have to put people first, to place people in a much more prominent place than we have been used to in the previous century. I will just point very briefly to two major problems of the 20th century. One of them was modernism. And of course, you know all about modernism, and you know how it was started in the 20s, and in the 30s it developed. It hibernated during the war and the Reconstruction, and in 1960 it was ready when all the cities started to expand. And then this new idea of modernism was taken in and used for expansion of the cities. Here's a little sketch by Corbusier saying that cities are bad and what is good is freestanding buildings. Also, public space is bad, streets especially bad, and what is good is glass. And here the dream has come to fulfillment, and it really started in the 60s. And okay, until this point, the way Homo sapiens built their cities were around spaces. The whole city was based on spaces. There were two types of spaces. There was a street based on the feet and the linear movement, and there was a square based on what the eye could see. These are the two elements going throughout the history of cities, and then the buildings went out to the spaces, so all the cities were based on spaces. What happened with modernism was that the focus was moved from the spaces to the objects, and whatever was not built upon was leftover space. And people then had to go out and be very happy in the leftover space. We found now very much that people does not enjoy leftover space, they enjoy space very much. This led, of course, to this hysteric celebration of the objects. And we can see, and also it led to a new type of architects, the bird-shit architects, who could fly all over the world and deliver objects wherever But you don't make cities by delivering objects, because cities are not made out of towers, but are made out of the areas between the various buildings. And then we have a world which may look like this, which is all because of this focus on the objects rather than the well-functioning city and the spaces for people. I call this also sometimes the Brasilia syndrome. And because at that time all the planners went up in aeroplanes and started to plan the cities from a safe height of 5 kilometers, and they took the objects and moved them around. Bingo, this is a good city. And Brasilia is fantastic. When I studied in the 50s, we stopped the education 3 times a day and went towards Brasilia. That was the biggest thing in the world, Brasilia. That was the way to go. And it looks wonderful from the air. It's an eagle, and the head of the eagle is the parliament. It looks wonderful from a helicopter, where all the excellent monuments of Niemeyer can be observed. Of course, the square doesn't look really as a space for people, but that's a little bit of a problem. And they have these fantastic big lawns and whatever. But down at eye level, Brasilia is shit. Because they never thought that there would be people moving around in this wonderful place. And you need a helicopter really to enjoy Brasilia. And they had no money to give all of them a helicopter. So what they do now is they walk around on these endless treeless paths, or they trample through the parks and whatever. To me it was a very depressing and a very characteristic thing of the modernism, that instead of making spaces for people, now they make objects, and people had to use the leftover space. To me, modernism has been a goodbye to the concern for people. Now we are concerned with the buildings, and not with the people who are outside the buildings in any way. Also, it was a goodbye to our sense of human scale, because with all these big buildings and big spaces, we completely lost sense of scale. The other big paradigm in the 20th century has been the car invasion. Again, it did not start in 1960, but that was when it was really rolled out in great numbers all over the Western world, and also later on in the developing world. I have 3 little stages of car invasion. Stage 1, Main Street, Copenhagen, Main Square, Copenhagen, 1905. People are walking freely all over. It's the people's city. There's one Ford T arrived, no problem. Then there are more cars, and everybody now starts to run for their life to get away from the public spaces, and they give the spaces to the cars. And phase 3 from Moscow, where the car is king. And this is a combination of pedestrian crossing, parking lot, and slalom training field. And gradually our cities have become more or less like this, and are taken away from the people. There's a fantastic difference between the old days when we were the masters and we had spaces, and now when we are the underdogs and the spaces are given to the cars. So that's a little bit about these 2 paradigms which had totally dominated the 20th century. If we go back to 1960, we knew actually nothing about. I was trained at that time, and I learned very carefully to do this kind of thing. And there was not a doubt that people will adapt and be happy about this. Of course, it's a nice composition, they will be happy. There was no knowledge that the physical environment influenced the quality of life and the patterns of life. And then, of course, we had from New York a strong voice. It was just about the same time, 61. Gehl Jacobs living in Greenwich Village, which Robert Moses was going to take away to build a big freeway across Manhattan and take all the old redundant Greenwich Village, Soho, Tribeca, Little Italy, Chinatown, take it all off. It was redundant, modern time demanded new things. So freeways across Manhattan and high-rise along the freeway so that you could save New York and make it a much better city. Unfortunately, the freeway went right through Gehl Jacobs' house in Greenwich Village. He was an architecture journalist with Architecture Forum, and she started a big revolt among the residents against these plans. They fought vigorously. She ended in jail for some screaming, but in the end, they scrapped the plans. All the things worked. And all the best areas in New York now are exactly the ones which Robert Moses in 1960s wanted to throw away. Her book, which has become really the Bible of humanistic city planning. So in this one she said that if the modernists and the motorists are to plan this world, it would be the end of the great cities and the start of dead cities. Then comes the story of my life. It is a little bit, it's very interwoven with that of Gehl Jacobs, but I was in Denmark and I hadn't heard about Gehl Jacobs at all. I was trained in all this good stuff. I was very good at that, I would say, because we spent 5 years to do this. And here's one of our teachers, he's a Swedish professor, and he said that the quality criteria for a good housing area is that it should look fine from the freeway. And here he has made some buildings and some housing areas which guaranteed look very interesting from the freeway. If they're good to live in is not a very major question here. But we were always hanging over the models, whatever. I went out of school of architecture to do all these wonderful things we've talked about, that modernism and whatever, light, air, and whatever, sunshine, and we shall get rid of the slums and whatever, we should do all this. And grass was good. I was out to do all this, full of energy and excitement, and then right away after my graduation, I married a psychologist. And then we had in our house a lot of young psychologists and a lot of young architects. And we did not, as architects, have a good time. They kept saying, why are you architects not interested in people? Why don't they teach you anything about people in School of Architecture? Why do you think your professors go out 4 o'clock in the morning to take photos of the monuments to be sure there are no people to distract in the foreground when they show the pictures at the lecture? Do you really think that the physical environment does not influence the quality of people's life? You know so little about what it's all about. And we realized, of course, that we knew nothing. There was no knowledge. Actually, part of the modernism was that they threw out, they said that traditional man is dead. Now we have a completely new species, modern man. Modern man will be running from his work to his house to his work. And all this, he needed new architecture, new city planning, new site planning, new furniture. He needed everything new because it was a new species. Homo sapiens was dead. But that was the background of these guys. And in this process, they threw out everything we knew about good cities. They were redundant. We could not use any of it. Now it was celebrating on the buildings. So that was very hard for young architects. So I had to go back to school for another 40 years of architecture. And to learn what they forgot to tell me in the first place. But then I found out they didn't know a shit. And I had to find it out myself. And so there was a lot of starting with cooperation with sociologists and psychologists and anthropologists. And basically my way of learning and quite a bit about the influence, the interplay between these work by observation. Thousands of places, and maybe my thesis was sitting for 1 full year, day and night, every day, on Main Street, Copenhagen, and see what does people do on the Main Street, on a car-free Main Street. We learned a lot, and much to my surprise, my little puny PhD called Life Between Buildings in Spanish, it's Presentación de Espacios Públicos. And that little one started to be grabbed from all over. I was especially happy to see it being used in several developing countries. Now it's out in almost 40, next week in Iceland. It's only 43 years since we did it. But then, and this interest in this subject showed me that it was a subject which was overlooked, all this, that architecture and people's life were closely intermingled and we didn't know anything about it. And there was a great hunger around the world to have information that could explain that these humble little books started to go around. But then later on, actually 40 years later, I was asked to do a new book about the same subject by a big foundation who said, Jan, couldn't we ask you to put down everything you know at this point while you can still remember it? So we had to write this book, and in just 8 years it's out now in 37 languages, for which I'm very proud, because we always intended that this knowledge should be as widespread as possible. That's why I donate it to everyone who wants to publish it. And that is, people are very happy about that. And that means that it can be widespread. I am very happy that all my books, every single of them, have been published in Chinese. They've been out in Chinese, some of them for 25 years. What makes me less happy is they never had time to read them yet. But we shall see what will happen. There are signs that they're waking up, things will be different. Summing up, after all these years of research, since the 1960 David Jacobs and until now, we actually, though there is not so much research done, I think it is Enrique Peñalosa in Bogota who say that it's a paradox that Homo sapiens know so much about good habitat for Siberian tigers and mountain gorillas, but they don't know anything about good urban habitat for Homo sapiens. But we know quite a bit now, and I would say we know enough to make nice cities for people, being it new towns or being it cleaning up in the existing towns. We know what to do. We know how these things are linked together. Then comes also, while all this research was going on, of course, the world has changed, and we started to have a series of new demands on city planning. And we started to see that all the mayors in the world, they said, would you like a livable, sustainable and healthy city? And they would say, oh, that's my program. That is exactly my program. So it's not anymore having more cars or having higher houses. Quality has started to creep in, and also these new challenges. Of course, livable, lively, having spaces for people where you could meet your fellow citizens, where you could see people. The greatest attraction in cities, we know for sure, is other people. And we always had public spaces where we could meet. And we still need them very much. Even in the day of all this mechanical digital stuff. You cannot live out of the digital stuff. You have to meet people. If you are sent out in Sahara with your iPhone for 3 weeks, you come out being crazy. So we need the public spaces, and we need the meeting of people. And we know that even with all this digital indirect communication, whenever you do good public spaces today, in any place of the world, they will eagerly be used because people still are social animals, and we still think that other people is the most interesting thing. There's some boys here in Italy, they're very interesting. But the girls really have a good time also because they know they're being observed. That's also very important. And if you're not observed, that is a problem. All this is an old game of people which we can spend hours and hours watching people. It's so interesting. We've had some new severe challenges, and that is of course the climate challenge. Just recently, the United Nations published a new report saying that it's really the 11th hour. We really have to do something fast, all of us, all over the world. And the cities are the ones who are sending the most, and there are, from the cities, most of the solutions can come. That's why they have the C40, which is now C93, the mayors of the great cities meeting to discuss how they can inspire each other in doing something about the climate. I heard, which was interesting, I heard that this climate debate was not so vivid in Chile at the moment. In Denmark it's very vivid at the moment, and the Prime Minister just declared a few days ago that in 12 years from now you cannot buy any vehicles which are with petroleum or diesel, which are with fossil fuel, and they will phase them out in the 2030s. They'll phase out all the fossil fuel vehicles, and that was a big uproar in the automobile industry and selling whatever, but that will have to happen. Already we know now that the more we walk and the more we bicycle, the better for the climate. And also to have really good alternative public transportation system, being they subways or linear transportation systems. We need good public rail so we can get to the public transportation in style, and we can build our habitations around the hubs of public transportation. We can really make a much more sustainable transportation system if it's not built on everybody. The idea, which is 120 years old, that to be mobile everyone should have a ton of steel and 4 rubber wheels. That was good 120 years ago, but it's certainly not good anymore, and it's not sustainable. Then we have got also a new problem, which is very serious. That is the sitting syndrome. And when we look upon it, we have made now for 50 years city planning which invites people to sit as much as possible. And they found out, the latest thing they found out is that people in suburbs die earlier than people in cities. And they've done that in 11 countries. Why is that? In the cities you walk more and there are more stairs. In the suburbs you sit more. And in the long run you die earlier. But they've also found that if you do 1 hour of moderate exercise every day, walking an hour, bicycling an hour, some combination, you could live 7 glorious years more, and you would be much more cheap for the health community, because you need not so many pills and doctors and hospitals, whatever. So they found that the people who move during their life, they're much cheaper in the end and have a much better quality of life. This is in America, this is a very serious problem, and now it starts to look upon it as serious as the smoke problem. Early on, people died of smoke. Now they die of sitting. And that has led to the World Health Organization saying to all of us, build cities so that naturally people walk and bike in the course of their daily doings. Make sure that that is part of what everybody is on. We have started lately to have a new type of problem, or not problem, but challenge, that 20% of all the people in our cities, they are elderly people. They have maybe 20 good years where they have lots of time to enjoy the city, and increasingly we have to go to conferences now, what to do, how to make a good city for the elderly. I'm very frequently invited because I know a lot about that, because I'm over 80. Anyway, my conclusion for many years on these various problems has been that if you are sweet to the people in the city, whether they walk or bicycle, you actually address all these questions to get a more lively, more livable, more sustainable, more healthy city, and also a city which is much better to be old in. If it's good for people, it's also good for the elderly. Then we can ask, are there cities around the world where everything is done to do that? The WHO asked us to do, to invite people to walk and bicycle as much as possible, not only on the Sundays, but definitely much more on the Mondays. And I could tell you that all over the world, cities are now in growing number doing more and more in this direction. I would say that whoever is not is falling behind quickly. So my point of view is maybe these cities are leading towards the future. And having had time, which I have not, I would have loved to tell you about our work with Melbourne, who have a very fantastic eagerness to revitalize Melbourne, and it's long ago. They work with it since the 80s. They are by far the best city in the southern hemisphere. Why Santiago is not the best in the south, I don't know, but it is Sydney, it is Melbourne. And Melbourne is fantastic, and if you don't know what to do, move to Melbourne. Sydney is full speed doing the same agenda. We want to be green, we want to introduce bicycles, we want to introduce light rails, pedestrian streets, whatever. There's this little flirt with New York, I'll come to that, and then Moscow. We haven't got much time, but we and I started it, and then later on we had Gehl architects, and we have worked in cities from one end of the world, from Greenland to Christchurch, New Zealand, from Tokyo to San Francisco or Santiago. But some of the major things have been, some of the major cities, we worked quite a bit with London, made a fantastic plan how to London could be much better. London is divided in 33 boroughs. So what they said was, oh, this is a fantastic plan. We will send it out to the boroughs and ask them to carry out the plan. So nothing has happened. The mayor will say, we do the plan, but the boroughs say, oh, we would like to go that way or that way or that way. And that's a little problem of being very subdivided. In New York, they had one mayor for 8 million, and he said, I will be the most sustainable city metropole in the world, and I'll do it while I'm still mayor. So we have only a few years. He went straight to Copenhagen, which was, of course, fantastic for us, because Copenhagen, in the meantime, got quite a bit of reputation of being a nice, sustainable, healthy city. And they were there for 2 days, and then they said, when can you come? We want a city like this one, when can you come? And then we were quick enough to say, Monday. And then we went to New York, and we worked with very nice relationship with working on putting in 1,000 kilometers of bicycle lanes and putting in also a number of public spaces. They were not used to public spaces because they were modern men. They walked from the metro to the office and back again. There was not a bench, not a sidewalk cafe. And if you were tired, you could go